Welcome to Ekvipage Podcast with Helle Knudsen. In this episode, Helle talks about her experience with Carrie, the aggressive horse.
Hello everyone. So today I want to make a podcast for you about the aggressive horse that I mentioned in one of my former podcasts. I think it was the one where a bit about who I am. I mentioned that I don't work with aggressive horses anymore. And there's a reason for that. Some years back, I was asked if I could help this young lady with a horse that was rearing when she was riding it, and she couldn't ride it. And like any other client, I said to her, well, I'll come have a look and we'll see how it goes. And this particular horse was a little brown mare called Carrie. Her name was Carrie. And I remember the first time I was there, I was in the box stall with this horse, just looking at it. It was eating hay, and all of a sudden, the owner sort of grabbed a hold of me and nearly pulled me out of the stall. And I was a bit confused. She's like, "Oh, but Carrie wants you to go, to leave the stall now." I was like, well, "Hang on for 1 second. What did you just say?" And she said, "Oh, but she did that thing, and so that means you got to leave the stall, otherwise she gets really, really angry." And we took the horse out and we did a little bit of groundwork. So this was the lady who called me to ask for help for this horse that was rearing when she wanted to ride it. And she's pulling me out of the stall when the horse is telling me to leave the stall. So I'm like, okay, seriously, we got some issues here. We took it into the arena and we did a little bit of groundwork with it, and I was just sort of feeling my way through. And I remember saying to this client that if she wanted this horse to work, we needed to be really spot on and really careful, and this was the last shot. And I remember talking about safety, how important it was that she started putting her foot down, but put it down in a gentle way, because this horse was showing some really weird behavior. And there was things that when you were sending her out or sending her in a direction, she would lean towards you in a very unpleasant way. And I told the owner, like the client, that I had that feeling that she was testing her grounds. Just sort of saying, well, if I need to do something crazy to you one day, can I? That was my gut feeling. She was testing if she could be aggressive if she needed to. She was testing how much was in there in the human. And over 6 months, I worked with this horse and the owner. And we did a decent job, I reckon. She came better. I did get to the point where I could sort of walk her around a little bit in the arena, riding her a bit, and she still had these weird moments sometimes, but they got fewer and fewer, and everything was sort of getting there slowly. But this owner had a great problem saying no to this horse. I think she was also maybe a bit scared of it, which makes sense. By all means, it makes a lot of sense. We had multiple times when I was working with this horse, if I got there and I said, "Can I take the horse into the arena and I'll just start working with it?" Things went rather smooth, but if I had the owner handle it, it was always very chaotic to get the horse to settle. After these 6 months, she actually asked me if I want to take over this horse because the horse had kicked her in the stall. And she was getting really scared. And we already talked about it. I already addressed the fact that this horse was not the right horse for her. She had it since it was 1.5 years, and it was 7 years old at the time. And I addressed it, like the safety issue of it, and the fact that this horse was not, it wasn't the horse to blame. The horse was not, the horse was just a sacrifice, or the horse was only one part of this problem. And the fact that the horse was no good for the owner and the owner was no good for the horse was just a plain fact. So we had talked about that she should probably see if she can find another owner for this horse, but it was rather difficult. But she should do it now. And maybe this horse would come around with a new owner, and maybe she would get better off with a new horse. So the unlucky thing happens that it actually does what I was sort of predicting in the beginning, saying, look, it's not okay if your horse tells you to leave the stall we got to work on this. And unfortunately, one day it did kick her as she was leaving that stall. It turned around and kicked her on the way out. So we agreed that I should take over the horse, and I did. And I was pretty confident. She was not a big horse or anything, and she was a nice horse and everything. I got her, picked her up in the float, in the horse trailer, and I remember that time I had a friend staying with me, and she had an Icelandic gelding, and this Icelandic gelding had just had an injury. He wouldn't put weight on two diagonal legs, like a hind leg and a front leg, and we really seriously didn't know what was wrong with this horse and thought he was going to be put down. And it happened 2 days before I picked this horse up, and he was in this Icelandic. He was in this small 3x3 meter paddock where we put him right, outside, and where he could see the horses. Everything was a good, nice setup. And we got Carrie home, and we put her in a paddock for on her own. And the next morning we come out, and this Icelandic horse had went through 3 fences, his own fence and 2 more, and beaten the shit out of this mare, this brown mare that I just got home. And he did it on 2 legs. I've never seen anything like that, and it just really made me wonder, because he was a fair and square Icelandic horse, and he was way away from her. She wasn't even next to him or anything, and normally he would not do that. And it just made me think there's something to this horse. He's picking up on something, so I'm probably right about the fact that I reckon she's a bit tricky. She had these funky things to us, just weird stuff, like she'd be sniffing the ground next to you, and all of a sudden she'd jump and bite your leg, and she'd just be back on sniffing on the ground, or she'd do just really weird stuff. We got the Icelandic sorted, we got the mare sorted. She wasn't harmed, but she was wet all over from sweating. He was chasing her around flat strap, and had been doing it for quite some time at the time we found him. The Icelandic was okay months after that. He was okay, and he's still here today. So this little brown horse, I started working her, and she had a lot of different issues to her. One of the issues was that when I was leading her off my own horse, my good horse, all of a sudden, like, I had everything under control. She was leading perfectly, and then she'd be starting to push. She'd be starting to walk a bit further ahead than she should, and I'd be saying, "Nah, I want you here. Please come back to this point, to this spot." And she'd be going forward again, and I'd ask her to come back, and she'd be going forward again, and she kept doing it sometimes. And if I told her, "Look, I want you to stay here," all of a sudden, out of the blue, she'd jump and she would bite onto the neck of my horse, the horse that I was actually riding, just really aggressive, just really attacking her, like, and biting onto it. And she was like that with other horses as well, in different aspects of, like, I've been in situations where I've had her and I've had my mare, and my mare was standing behind me just eating some grass because I was ready to go riding. I wanted to lead Carrie off her, and I was cleaning down Carrie, so I was in between these 2 horses, and it was a safe distance and everything was cool. And all of a sudden, Carrie would jump as if I wasn't there and attack my horse and just basically go through me. And I did a whole lot of work on that, and I did a whole lot of stuff, and we got it sorted down the road. Then I had one incident where I was actually in the paddock. I took him out on some summer grass. That was back when they were still grazing, and I was just out there doing some work with him, and I had this blink, this half a second, where she walked a bit close to me, and I told her to back off a bit, and she did a twitch where I was like, after that, I was just like, what was that? I picked up on something, a hunch or something, but I didn't know what it was. But it just told me that something was still going on, and it wasn't the right setup that I had for the horse that she was out there. I needed to bring her home and have her closer again. So I did that. And one night, when I was actually going to bed, I was like, oh, hang on, I'm just going to go out and say goodnight to the horses. It was a summer night in end of June or beginning of July, and I went into this paddock that was probably, it wasn't a very big paddock. It was probably 200 by 100 meters or something. It had a 3-wire fence around it, and it had a lot of hip rows, bushes and stuff nearly all the way around, except for one side, and that side, our neighbour had a paddock on the other side, and their fence was, of course, a couple of meters away, so the horses couldn't reach over the fence line. I walked into this paddock and the horses were down the bottom, and Carrie sees me, so I'm basically in the middle of it now, and Carrie sees me, and she turns around, she comes walking up towards me, and I'm just like, oh, that's nice, she's coming towards me. I didn't take any particular notion of it. My other horses were just standing down the bottom, and when she came up close to me, she had low head, soft eyes, soft ears, soft nose, nothing in particular. And I really seriously think this is 10 years ago, actually. It was in 2007. And I really think that if I was watching this on a video today, I wouldn't be able to pick the fact that she was actually going to attack me in like 3 seconds. She looked just nice and comfortable. And I just take my hand and I strike it. I make this soft stroke on her nose, like on her forehead. And I step aside because I was actually going to pass her and go on down to my other horses. So I stroke her forehead and on her neck. And just as I do it down the neck, she, out of the blue, she just jumps in the air and bites out, like really clapping her teeth 2 or 3 times right next to my head, so I can feel the air from her bite or her movement right in my face, on my cheek and near my ear. And in the same motion as this, like she throws her front legs out towards me, but she does it right on the side of me, and I can feel this wind or this air just, touching my pajamas. And in a third of a second, she just spins around and throws both her hind legs at me, really tall up in the air, and they come right in front of me, swishing up in front of my head, and she doesn't touch me. She lands on the ground, and now because I'm sort of, moving or leaning, or I'm just moving away from all of this, of course, I'm in shock, and because she's moving around, when she's landing, we have these couple of meters distance between us. And she just stops, she lands on the ground, turns around real slow, and walks up towards me again. And here I am, I'm just scared for my life. And I remember thinking, don't lean forward on your on your forefoot. By all means, don't lean backwards on your heel. Just make sure you're balanced on a full foot, so you're not going to provoke this horse. You don't want to take it any further, and just be aware of what she's doing. And then I'm thinking, what the hell was that? What the freaking hell was that? As in, that was over. But it wasn't. Because she walks up to me again, and this takes, she lands on the ground, she turns around and walks 2 meters towards me, 3 steps or something. It doesn't take forever, right? And I think all these thoughts before she actually gets to me. And I'm just standing there, just as neutral as I can, thinking, what the hell was that? And she does it again. She repeats exactly the same pattern again. She's biting at me multiple times, kicking with her front legs, like both front legs, spinning around 180 degrees and throwing her hind legs up right next to my head, just so close to my head. And I had a border collie at that time, and he was chasing around like a nutcase, grabbing at her legs and barking, and she didn't care shit about him. And I'm still, leaning backwards and probably moving backwards, and she lands and she turns around the second time, comes towards me again, and I don't know quite what I'm thinking unless I have this unreal, the feeling I had in my body was like panicky, but also like for real, like, is this really happening? That was the second freaking time she did it. And I'm looking to the sides, and there's no way, I'm in the middle of this paddock, there's no way I can go. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to turn my back on this horse, because I know if it was a bull, I know how I'd handle that. And I was just so dead set straight on just standing here looking at it. I was like, you got to ride it out. So she comes towards me, and I had this feeling that I don't quite know what's going to happen, but fair income, I mean, she's done it twice. What's the chances that she's going to do it the third time? Well, that's a 50-50, isn't it? She's either going to do it or not. She did, so she repeats it the third time. Now this is getting really ugly. I'm really scared shitless at this time, and my blood is pumping, my adrenaline is up. I don't know anything about what to do, and I don't see any way out of this, basically. I have like 1,000 thoughts at the same time while this horse is clapping her teeth, just biting at me ridiculously and striking at me with her front legs multiple times this time, spinning around and kicking her hind legs, both hind legs full power, right at me, just next to my head. And she lands on the third time. And you know what she does? She just walks away. She's just walking away from me, nice, quiet, low head, soft ears, towards the other horses down the end of the paddock. So here I am thinking that's my exit cue. I should really get out of this paddock now. So I turn around, but I keep looking over my shoulder because I don't want to leave the control of whatever control I had over that situation. I didn't have any control. She was in full control of this. So I'm starting to walk up to the end where there was my neighbour's fence. And I'm walking fast, but I'm thinking not to run and not to invite her to come chase me, not to do anything silly, just walk, but get out of this place. And I'm looking over my shoulder, and she walks all the way down. It wasn't a very big paddock, remember? She walks all the way down to these other two horses, and she just stops dead in her tracks with her hind end towards me. And here I am walking away from her, and she turns her head to the left, to her left side, and I could just swear I had a full that was the weirdest moment. I just had that full eye contact with that left eye, and she was, oh my God, she just sat down on her hindquarters, did a roll back, and she came flying at me, running all the way up, like in my back, and I was just like bolting out of there. I was out. I was running for my life towards this fence, and she kept running behind me, just biting around my head, like teeth clicking and just hammering away. And she she was playing with me in a way or something, like she was just striking her front legs as she was cantering behind me. I mean, she wasn't running really fast because I was running all that I could. So basically it was easy for her to catch me, but she was like flicking her front legs at me in every stride, and I could just feel it, like I could feel all the air from her movement around my head and around my neck and down the back, even though I had pajamas on. So I come to the fence, and all I remember is praying to God that she wasn't like a bull, that she'd stop at the fence and don't go through, because that was my only rescue. So I was running towards this fence, and like some other freaking ninja. I mean, if you've noticed, I'm not the smallest of persons, or smallest of people, and I just did the neatest sliding roll something move through my own 3-wire fence and all the way through my neighbour's fence line. That was 1.5 meters, maybe even a bit more, maybe close to 2 meters away from my fence. And I ended up in their paddock. So when you get frantic, obviously your body can do stuff that you wouldn't be able to do normally. But she stopped at the fence. She turned around and she walked off. She just walked to the other horses, and everything was good. Everything was happy. So I survived. I don't know how long that took, 30 seconds or something in total. I've got no idea, but I know that when a horse moves, they move fast. So it probably didn't take very long. It felt like 3 hours or something to me. I was leaving the next day to go somewhere, and I had someone to come over, look out for the horses, or look after the horses. And I called her and said, look, there's a change of plans. I'm just going to chuck some straw in there. Don't go in the paddock by all means. Leave it until I get back, and I'll sort it from there. And I called the neighbours around the place and said, look, you're not going to enter my paddock by by any means. If something happens, you call me and we'll sort it from there. So now I was in this other mood in this other position that told me that I needed to do something. And this horse ended up being put down, of course. No horse is worth that risk. It's just ridiculous. And I even had people at that time, when they heard of it, they called me and said, "Oh, but you don't have to put it down. I'd like to give it a second chance." So I was just wondering, what does that mean, a second chance? That's what she had with me, I reckon. And I think there's a second chance is where a prospect of doing better. And this horse had that aggressive behavior for whatever reason. I don't know. But I know that I was not in a provocative situation. I was not in a situation where I was actually asking her to do something. She did it out of the blue. Of course, I triggered something. I did. But because I did, this horse was never ever going to be in a position where a person could say, now she's not going to do it anymore. We fixed the problem. She's not going to do it anymore. Because that problem, that issue, was potentially lethal. So my objective was that this horse was to be put down, and we did. And I think it was a smart decision. What I think happened really is that, apart from her going mental and me being frantic, as I said, if I was looking at this today on a video, I don't think there was anything that I could pick up on. And maybe there were, but I don't think there was. After that, I went to Australia for another 6 months, and because I did that, I had 2 other horses. I had Rosie and Amelia, and I had someone look after them. So shortly after this, I didn't train or work very much with horses. I went to Australia, and there was some months there before I got to work with horses again. And when I did, I remember this horse, this old nice mare called Molly, and I was to pick her up, and she was just eating straw hay out of a bale. And I went over and I was like, "Come on, Molly, I'm just going to put this halter on you." And she flicked her ear. And in that second, I just jumped 2 meters or something backwards. I got so scared, and my adrenaline was pumping. My heart was racing. And I was like, hey, hang on. And Molly was just chewing on the hay. She didn't do anything. She was like, "What's that weird lady doing?" I just nearly had a panic attack. And it occurred to me that I hadn't worked very much with horses since Carrie attacked me. And I had never been around a horse that flicked the ears. And Molly was just a bit, I don't know, unhappy about me picking her up. She didn't know me. She wanted to stay at the hay, whatever. Or it could have been a horse on the other side. I don't know why she did it, but it was just a flick. It wasn't pinning her ears, but it was just a flick going backwards, looking a bit unhappy. But it was the first time I saw that since Carrie attacked me. And my brain and my entire body, my entire nervous system thought that I was going to die, basically. That was the craziest reaction I've ever tried. And I stood there and I got a hold of myself, and I started laughing a bit, and I went up to Molly. I was like, "Can we just, let's go?" And I took her out the paddock and did whatever I needed to do. But I really thought about it afterwards, like, shit, if I'm reacting like that to this 20-year-old mare that I know is being handled by anyone at any level, she's really nice and quiet and a good learning horse, then I should probably start being a little bit aware of what position I put myself in with other horses. Because I didn't know that was what happened to me, that I got so scared that my body was reacting to it. So it's still like that a bit today. I've gone through a lot and I've been working with it, and my way of working with it is partly talking to some professional people about like what this means and why do I feel this way, because it's a very important thing that I need to trust myself. I need to be able to know that, like, where my limits are, but also not to freak out in a situation where there's nothing to freak out on or over. And what it comes down to is the fact that I thought I was in control. Until that day, I could handle anything with any horse. That was basically my attitude. Not a cocky attitude or anything, but I just had this firm, quiet belief that I was doing okay. I was good at what I did, and I knew myself, and I would be able to tell if something got out of hand. And basically I was proven wrong, because I thought that was okay, and it turned out not to be. The only reason I wasn't hurt in the situation was that Carrie didn't intend to hurt me. There's no human quick enough to move away from a kicking and biting and throwing front legs and stuff from a horse. No way. The only reason I wasn't really seriously hurt or killed in that particular evening was that she didn't want to do it. But I'm pretty sure she was just checking out. If she needed to do some more damage to me one day, she would. And that's why I chose to put her down. So I think the morality in this is no one's untouchable. You just know what you know until you know something else. And I know I have a limit today to horses that are aggressive. It doesn't mean that I won't meet them and stuff, but I completely know what horse to work with and what not to work with, because I can just sense it. And I can even have a horse that are not aggressive, but I just have the sense that something is wrong. And yeah, I always listen to that. I'm not too proud to say that there's a horse I won't work with, because it's my health and it's the horse's reputation as well that I'm working with. If a horse is once aggressive, it's just difficult, you got to be such a skilled horse person to work with that. And there's just certain behaviors in a horse or in horses that once they occur, you can't say that, it can be very, very, very dangerous to say that it's not going to happen again, that it's been fixed. Because if it happens, it can cost someone dearly. So yeah, I think it's important to think of that. No one's unbeatable. And no one's perfect. So now you got my reason for why there's horses I don't work with. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed listening to that story, and I hope I'll be able to work more on it in the future. I'm still getting better. I'm not at all, like 10 years down the road, I'm not at all as influenced by it anymore. But it's just a good thing to be aware of. And if you have anything like that, don't lie to yourself. Just be aware of it and use it. I mean, then I might not be very handy at working with aggressive horses, but there's something else that I'm really good at then, because I've still spent my time doing stuff. So yeah, don't be afraid to back down if you feel uncomfortable doing something. It can be worth it for sure. So, rightio. Thank you for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this. It's played a big role in my life, and maybe it can keep you from getting into the same position or into the same situation. So, yep. Well, anyways, you take care out there, and until next time, have great fun. Bye. Hi, everyone. I have just recently done this podcast on Carrie, the aggressive horse, and told you the story about how I don't work with aggressive horses anymore because I was attacked by one that didn't hurt me, but it sure as hell put a fright into my life. I just remembered that there was something very important that I didn't go over on that podcast, so I want to chuck that in here. I think when you have an issue with a horse, a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about why that horse has that particular issue, to find the reason for it. And maybe if you listen to the podcast about Carrie, maybe you're wondering why she would attack me, why she had this weird behavior. And to tell you the truth, I don't know. I think sometimes it's a waste of time to go into why a certain behavior is what it is. With Carrie, I knew that there was issues, and my best bet on this horse and my feeling back then and my experience with the former owner was that she'd been, how do you put it, she didn't have a lot of limitations or a lot of boundaries. She was allowed to do a lot of stuff, and maybe she was even babied a bit. I don't think the owner had the proper leadership skills, not as in being the alpha or anything. I'll talk way more than that, way more about leadership in one of the next following podcasts, because it's a big subject to me. But I think I've actually thought a couple of times that Carrie was actually kissed to death. That's basically how to put it. She was just looked after in with all the best intentions, but the foot was never really put down. And maybe I firmly believe that horses are just very different. Some horses are different than others, like human beings are. And Carrie must have been like a bit more of a difficult horse, maybe as a baby or something, but sure as hell she didn't have the boundaries she should have had, and that's why she just kept stretching it until that day when she was attacking me. When we spent all this time wondering about why the horse has a particular issue, we also keep a focus on it, and I reckon that's a big problem. Because if you have a focus on that, how's your horse ever going to change into something new? It can be handy to know. I mean, I knew about this horse that she had weird behavior. The owners told me, and I knew it. So I was aware of it all the time, which was a good thing to be. But I didn't go into it any further than that. And if you have a horse that has issues, don't dig into why. It can be handy to know why, but if you know why, say, okay, I know it, righto, nice to know, chuck it away. Just focus on what you want, because the focus gets drawn to all the bad things, pardon me, and when it does that, your horse is kept in that loop, I reckon. You got to change, and you got to set the frames for this change by actually offering the change. And you don't offer a change if you keep having in mind that this horse was dealt with in this particular way. I think especially ladies, I'm sorry if you're a lady listening in, but especially women have this tendency to hang on to the fact their horse has been through some sort of abuse. And most times the horses that I meet where people claim that they've been through abuse, I know for a fact they haven't, because an abused horse is way, way, way more sensitive and stuff than what I've seen these horses. And if you have a horse that has actually been abused, doesn't it really deserve to just get set free? Also, in your mindset and everything, just to have that freedom from constantly being reminded that something was ugly at a time. Don't baby it, just treat it as a horse. Just do normal stuff and help it along the way. If something jams up, if something happens and it gets all nervous and stuff, just help it. But don't help it remembering or feeling sorry for it. Just help it because it needs help. Just do whatever's needed in that particular situation and get on with it. And especially sensitive horses, like all the ladies and the women having sensitive horses, my God. Maybe they're just horses, and just, get on with it. Just, if they're sensitive, teach them how not to be sensitive, instead of keeping them in this, but my horse is so sensitive. Oh, be aware of this because my horse is very sensitive. Just, get on with the job, and you can be a bit more soft or whatever, but rules are rules, and they need to be followed to get a partnership to work out. So, yeah. I think that was just a bit of my thoughts and a bit of a follow-up to Carrie. And yeah, I think this is a subject that I'm going to dig into a bit more about how to address when a horse has had some issues and to work on with it from there. So, yep, if you enjoyed this, you might want to listen in on the future podcasts. So stay in tune and have fun until then. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to give us a rating, thumbs up, or a like depending on where you're listening. This helps more people find the podcast. Also, want to listen to the podcast before everyone else? Be sure to support us on Patreon. You can find a link in the show notes.